Being great at sales is essential to your business and your career, but you and I both know that the stress of selling and dealing with constant rejection can be an emotional drain. My entire brand, No BS Selling, is based on the belief that professional sales is a skill and not a personality, and that to be better at sales takes constant refinement and a dedication to your craft. This show is for salespeople and entrepreneurs who are committed to improving their sales skills and getting better results, and are sick and tired of the BS game that often happens between buyers and sellers. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast, and I'm your host, Walker McKay. I'll help you and your sales team make selling easier, feel less cheesy, and be more lucrative. It's time to change the rules and level the playing field between you and the people you sell to. You're already good, let's be better. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast. Today, my guest is Deb Calvert. She's president of People First Productivity Solutions and also the founder of the Sales Expert Channel. She's also the author of two books. One, Stop Selling and Start Leading, and the second is Discover Questions, Get You Connected. I've invited Deb on the show because she is an expert and has written books, as you know, about asking questions. And that is something that we salespeople always need to be getting better at and need to know more about. So, Deb, welcome to the show today. I'm so glad you're here with us.
Me too. Thank you, Walker. I love what you're doing here.
Well, thank you so much. Well, tell me something, Deb. How in the world, well, take 2 minutes and tell me how you got where you are right now, how you created this company or how you got there.
All right. Well, once upon a time, I was just a do-gooder. I went to journalism school because I grew up when Woodward and Bernstein were breaking loose everything with Watergate, and I wanted to be just like them. I was so idealistic. And what I really wanted was just to be able to make a difference. So coming out of school with my journalism degree, I went to apply at my local newspaper, the Kansas City Star, and they were a little more finicky than I understood they would be about who they would hire into the journalism side of the business. Not me. But I did take the first job they'd give me, which was in advertising sales. I loved selling. I found out that's a place where you really can also make a big difference for people. So I never looked back. I never went over onto the other side, the dark side of journalism. Stayed in selling, eventually ended up at a Fortune 500 over 31 newspapers across the country.
Wow.
And then when that company was sold 15 years ago, I went into business for myself.
And so was that transition from working for big corporate to working for yourself, was that a big deal for you, or is that something you'd always planned on doing?
I had never planned on doing it, but I didn't want to move again, having just relocated out to California for that job a few years prior. And it was a really big change. Most of it deliberate, because I watched a fantastic company with a lot of really good people practices. I watched it completely radically change as they set themselves up to be sold. And I came to understand very quickly how important it is to put people first in the work that you do. So starting a business and taking that point of view to do things that they were no longer doing, that felt right.
Love that. And I know you've got that in your name of your business. What does putting people first mean?
It means that before you think about process, products, even profits, you think about the people who are going to make that happen. You think about your customers and your employees, and you put them first if you want to have any sort of long-term sustainable success.
So you look out for their interests first. Is that correct? Or what they would want, what they would need. Is that correct?
That's part of it. But you think very closely about who you hire. You think about the people that you're going to serve as your customers. You think about what their needs are, not just because somehow you're going to have this. I'm not so much a do-gooder anymore, right? I'm a business person.
It can be both. You have to pick.
But, right, you, at some point you do have to make that profit and have those processes and everything else that goes along with it. But you can't do it alone. You need people who understand the business and who are aligned with you to make it happen. So
and those who will buy from you too.
Yeah. The ones that you want to do business with. Yes.
Right. Correct. Yes, absolutely right. So I'm going to jump right into what I think would be the most helpful and maybe interesting to our audience, the No BS sales team, is this book that you wrote, Discover Questions, Get You Connected. It's a really good book. I'm a couple of chapters in. I haven't finished it yet, but you created Discover as an acronym, right? And so, and each one of those stands for a different type of question. Can you kind of go over those with us, and then we're going to dig in more to what the different types of questions are?
Sure. Now, I should say that that acronym Discover is based on over 20 years of research with buyers and sellers. There are over 10,000 sales calls, and it wasn't just me. I had a small army of people helping me. We documented every question that salespeople and business owners were asking their customers. And then I was looking for, why did they ask that question? What are the purposes? So 8 types are really 8 purposes of asking questions. And I've since then concluded that there are no more than 8 types. I actually held out for a while, Walker. I wanted to find a 9th reason for asking questions, because in my mind, the word should be discovery. I thought that'd be cool.
Right, gotta be. Yes, yes questions.
Yeah. So, and then finally I realized, discover is a word too, and there are only 8 purposes for asking questions. So I landed on that 10 years ago now, and have never found anything since then.
What I love about this so far is that you said, you're focused on the purposes of asking questions. And I remember, my audience has heard me say this, but every single bit of sales training, every sales manager, every whatever, even if they don't follow it, will always say, you got to ask more questions, you got to ask the right questions. But there are very few people that actually have the right questions. And I'm not so sure that there is one specific list of the right questions. And I think what you've done is make it even more powerful by helping us realize it's not the questions, it's the purpose. And what are you trying to learn, right? So maybe it's not what are the right questions, but what are the purpose you'd ask and what are you trying to learn? So I'm glad you got to that.
Yeah, otherwise it just becomes a fishing expedition. I've seen a lot of sellers. I do in-field coaching, and they have a list of questions that somebody created for them, and they go down their list. It starts to feel like they're a census taker or something. Yep. They're just checking boxes, and then they get back to the office. They have all this information, and they have no idea what to do with it. Right. They don't understand even what the follow-ups could have been that would have made it valuable information.
You're absolutely right. I've also experienced it, been on the wrong side of this, where it felt like an interrogation as well, right? I mean, where people are just there anyway. It's a tough situation. So begin to tell me about Discover. Tell me about some of the purposes.
Yeah, you bet. Well, there are 3 that everybody will recognize, because these are the 3 that are most commonly used in selling or any business relationship. The D stands for data. Anytime you're gathering facts, that's a data question. Yeah. And then from spin selling or any other model of questioning that you've ever seen, you'll also recognize the CEO. Those are consequence and outcome questions. They travel together. Consequence questions discover the pain points or the potential consequences of not taking action or of taking the wrong action. And outcome, that's hopes, dreams, plans, goals, visions of the future. What are your client's goals? So those are the standards. Yeah. And what that means is that you have this huge opportunity to differentiate yourself and build trust with your buyers if you understand the other 5 purposes that most salespeople never ask about.
I think even my experience has been that most salespeople only ask data questions, and it's the ones that probably they're much higher up the food chain that even ask about consequences and outcomes. So I'm really interested to learn more about the other ones.
You bet. And I'll say this one last thing about data questions. On the buyer side of our research, we asked buyers how they felt about questions that were asked and what their reactions were. And it turns out that out of all 8 types of questions, the one that's lowest value from a buyer's perspective is data. And that's because they already know the answer. It's boring to them. Right? Yeah. They're just, it's self-serving to you, the seller, but to them, it's just, here we go again. So
I don't know where you fall on this, but one of my ideas, or one of the things I teach my clients is it's important. Data is good, but what's really important is to learn our customers' opinions about things and to have them begin to opine about what they think their situation is and where they want to go and what are their things. And so our job is to go learn their opinions and through different questioning strategies. So I'm looking forward.
It's actually value creation. When you ask questions that are thought-provoking, that show people you're truly interested, and are making them think about things that are meaningful in their business. And when you take the time to listen and you ask those follow-ups and you have a good conversation, I mean, that is a customer experience that's unrivaled. So instant differentiation, good bonding and trust building, and really rich information that you can get very efficiently.
It's awesome. So tell me about some other types of questions.
Yeah. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'll tell you about my favorite. That's the V question. V is for value. And these are the questions that you ask to understand, or to help your customer for themselves understand what matters most to them. So maybe they just told you a laundry list of needs that they have. And if you're like most salespeople, you either pounced on the first one that you heard or the first one that you can potentially solve for.
Yes.
Yeah. And in that, you missed perhaps what the bigger needs were. And then you come back later and you're wondering, well, they said they needed that, so why aren't they buying my solution?
Yes.
Yeah, it's because you didn't ask something like, hey, Walker, out of those 4 things you just told me were going on right now that you need to take care of, which one is most urgent? Which one is most important to you right now?
Nice. Yep. Which one is most important, right? Because I got a million problems, and if you had enough time, I could list them all out, but there are only a few that I have enough bandwidth, interest, money, and time to deal with right now. Right?
Yeah, and I want to tether to that one. Maybe I can't directly solve that problem that's the most important for you, but I can certainly dignify it, empathize with it, show how solving this other thing gives you time to do that. Whatever I need to do, I got to weave it in there because that's what you care about.
I think it's interesting the way you just said that, especially in today's strange times we're in, talking about, what my father taught me was to be, or he kept telling me to be sincerely curious. And one of my father's hobbies was trying to understand other people, which every single person being different. And that was kind of part of what drove him. And among the things that I wish I'd heard him tell me this before I was 32. I didn't hear it. He may have said it earlier, was Walker worked very hard to be interested, not so hard at being interesting.
Yes.
And so, with that as a backdrop, to really dig in and to show empathy to people and ask questions, not just to ask the question, but to truly learn what's going on with that person and what they think, and to hang in there about that. So I think you're dead on. And part of being human, part of this crisis that we're going through with our health and with the economy, I think being human is a skill that we need to practice more and more and more, right? We need to embody that more and more and more.
Absolutely. You mentioned one of my books, not the one we're talking about right now, but the other, Stop Selling and Start Leading. It's very much about the behaviors that sellers show up with and buyers respond to. And so that's a resource if people want to learn more about that. In my Connect to Sell blog, I've written a big series all year long. I've been posting about soft skills for sellers and how much they truly do matter. And I think I would have liked your dad. So
you would have loved my dad. He was hysterical. He was an attorney, practiced law for 45 years. And we used to play this game when we go to, he would go to parties or go to dinner parties or whatever, and or meetings. And he would go and he'd ask people questions because he was sincerely curious. And he would come home and I'd say, Dad, how many people ask you about you? And he said, tonight, 0. And majority of the time it was 0. And people thought he was charming because he wasn't talking about himself.
Yes.
I wish he'd bragged on his son more, but other than that, there was no reason for him to, I never say more, but it's amazing the power of that and understanding the power of that. Hey, tell me something. I heard, I listened to a podcast a couple of months ago, somebody who has a PhD in question asking or something, but he talked about the brain, thoughts in your brain are like clouds that fly over, right? And at pretty fast speed most of the time. And he made the comment, he said, people can process thoughts at somewhere around 1,250 words a minute, but they can only speak between 90 and 110, say, words a minute. And so he did the math and said that's somewhere between 8 and 10%. If you ask somebody one question, you can learn between 8 and 10% of what they're thinking on a subject. But that by asking follow-up questions, you ended up gathering, almost like X2 times that each time you asked a follow-up question. Have you heard that before, and do you believe that?
I haven't heard it like that scientifically, but I absolutely believe it. I love nothing better than when someone says to me, "Oh, that was a great question." And then I ask a follow-up question and they say, "Wow, you're really making me think." And then they go on and on and on, and I get a lot of information, a lot of insight. We have a connection, and people do remember that, just like you were saying that they did with your dad. Buyers say about sellers who ask more questions and who ask thoughtful, curious, probing follow-ups, they say, "Ooh, she's really smart," or "Wow, I really feel like he cared about me." And those are all extreme positives and differentiators for those of us who take the time to do it.
You're right. And one of my things, and probably yours too, is that sales, you're playing the long game, and that sometimes there's not a sale for you today. But how much easier is it for you to get back in the door if what you did was try and learn someone's opinion, and I say without sharing your own? And it's easier when you call them back to be able to get another point because you were somebody who took the time to listen and ask, paid attention, and valued what they said.
And let me just put a fine point on what you said. It's not that you never get to share your opinion. It's that initially you are interested because we'll put another truism here, which is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Correct.
So you've got to do it in the right order.
I love that. Can I add one more truism that I've also enjoyed very much is salespeople often look for things they have in common with their prospect. And I tell them that's a waste of time, that the only thing you need to have in common with your prospect is that you care about your prospect, because your prospect cares about themselves. You just have to make sure that they know you care about them. And the way you can show about caring is by asking their opinions and learning what it is help them pull out their truth. How'd you get interested in questions? How'd this come up as a subject for you?
Oh, well, I was one of those little 3-year-olds who was always asking questions. You know how 3-year-olds, why?
Yes.
Except that I was relentless. And I can remember being 6 or 7 years old and the teacher calling my mom in and saying, "Yeah, Debbie, she just asked so many questions. We got to find a way to teach her not to ask so many questions." And, so over time,
like that teacher.
Well, my mom did resist a little bit, but at home she gave me a talking to a few times about, that's too many questions. So I did. I suppressed it going on into, middle school, high school. But then I discovered 2 things in high school. I discovered journalism, where you're supposed to ask people questions. And I discovered debate, where especially in the cross-examination portion, you get lots of bonus points for asking good questions. And man, those 2 things unleashed it. And I never, ever again lost my passion. Everything I've pursued since then was all about asking questions. So I don't know where it came from. I was born with it, I guess.
It's an innate thing, right? So other than being a journalist, did you have any other things when you were growing up that you wanted to be?
The other thing I thought about being was a social worker. I really was a do-gooder. And neither one of them paid well, so that wasn't the deciding factor. I happened to grew up in Missouri, and one of the best journalism schools in the country was right there. So that was one of the things that took me that direction.
That's awesome. All right. So another thing that you are the founder of, that I'm a big fan of, is called the Sales Network Channel.
The Sales Experts Channel, yes.
Sales Experts Channel, excuse me. And so tell me something, what are some of the resources there? Because a lot of small business owners are kind of scrambling for resources, and where do we find things? Talk to me about in my audience, about some of the resources that are available on the Sales Experts Channel for business owners.
Okay. Well, the Sales Experts Channel has over 500 presentations, and we're adding new ones every week, if not every day. It is a collaboration between sales experts, authors, speakers, trainers, coaches around the world. And these global sales experts have agreed to contribute educational and inspirational content in the form of webinars and videos. On our website, that's all available on demand. It's topically indexed, and it's all free. It's all fabulous, and it's all free. You just go in there and take what you need. And be sure, and when you tune in, notice that a lot of them attach even more than that, bonus content like articles or infographics or follow-ups that you can use. And The live channel, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, if you want to subscribe to the channel and always know what's coming next, that's the website is thesalesexpertschannel.com. You got to go to Bright Talk, the Sales Experts channel, to get subscribed to our live stuff.
Okay.
I suggest both.
Bright Talk Sales Experts channel, right?
Yeah.
All right. And so what was your idea? I love the story about this. Tell me, what was your idea? How'd you come up with the Sales Experts channel?
Well, here's maybe that little do-gooder thing didn't go away completely. I used to, years ago, when Blog Talk Radio and podcasting was still a fairly new thing, I used to have a 4-hour radio program, live radio call-in show every Saturday morning. And I had that because I remembered what it was like to be in sales and to not really have people I felt comfortable going to help me.
Yeah.
You kind of have to figure it out, and there's a vulnerability in selling. So I had this call-in show, and people would call me and they'd be like, Deb, I don't really want to give my name if it's okay, or I don't want to say where I'm from, but I don't have anybody else to talk to about this. And they'd ask me questions and I would coach them about selling. So I did that for a long time, started having guests on the show, started kind of missing my Saturday mornings. Mm-hmm. And by then I had also brought in some sponsors. And as soon as I had sponsors, they were paying me to do this, I lost interest. And yeah, I mean, at first I thought it was because it was my Saturday mornings and I wanted those back. But I realized later on, flash forward, I realized two things. First of all, I do really want to give something back to the sales community. Selling has been amazing for me personally. I wanted to give something back. And the second thing I realized was I don't have all the answers and I can't do it all myself. So that's why, having now enlisted over 150 sales experts to contribute, it's a much more powerful give back.
Really, it's an awesome story. And they're not, I gotta be honest, I don't know of a lot of people that are giving a lot back for free to the sales community, but what you are doing is putting those resources in one place. And I think it's very awesome what you're doing.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question you probably weren't expecting, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for them?
Oh boy, I've been so blessed all throughout my life. What a nice question. The kindest thing, well, are we talking about professionally?
I don't care.
I got to rule out all my if we're doing that, I got to rule out family.
Fine. Professional or personal, either one's fine.
I've had so many mentors, and I'll tell you one of the kindest things recently. Barry Posner, he is one of my co-authors in Stop Selling and Start Leading. And over in the leadership domain, he's one of the preeminent experts. He's a professor, he's very knowledgeable, and he's a researcher who's done incredible work on leadership. And he's mentored me, and he sent me once a beat up, ratty old satchel, with a shoulder strap. Mm-hmm. And it's got the logo of the Leadership Challenge, which is his body of work, along with his primary co-author, Jim Kouzes. They've done work for over 35 years together. And I opened up this package and I saw this old dirty satchel, maroon colored, and I thought, well, that's weird. Why did he send me this? And then I found the card and the note. And he said, hey, since the very beginning, when we were first starting our research, all over the world doing our research, I took this bag with me, and our materials were held within this bag. And as I think about my own legacy, I want someone to carry our work forward. Let this satchel be a representation of carrying the work, and I think you're the person who's best suited to carry it forward. Now, why that was a kindness? So to answer your question, the reason that was a kindness is because it came at a time, and I think he knew this, when I really needed a little buoying, a little encouragement.
Yeah.
And to think about the path, I took a path in business which is sort of unusual. People tell you you've got to have a niche and you've got to be very single-minded, and I didn't do that. Yep. And I was having a crisis of conscience about, do I need to go one direction or the other? And what he did was he affirmed for me that you don't have to play by everybody else's rules. you can do your own thing, and if you're committed, you can make it work.
Love that. And it was a great thing. I love the symbolism of the pack too. I think that's great, the satchel. One more business related question. Tell me about a sale that you thought you had, that you thought you were going to close, that didn't close. Tell me about a good one there. Do you have one?
I do, but it's a little bit embarrassing. So, okay, so I'm flashing back to when I was at the Kansas City Star. Yeah. I was an outside salesperson. I started inside and earned my way into an outside territory sales role. And I had this territory that was pretty underdeveloped. And in that territory, there were a lot of pawn shops and gun stores. It was, you know, little different from most of the other territories.
Right.
And I wanted to sell advertising to some of these gun shops. There were 5 or 6 in this territory.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to do that is because I didn't have a lot of other, you know, traditional newspaper advertiser clients in that territory. But also there was something called co-op, which meant there would be free advertising for them if they would commit some portion of the dollars. And that meant it would be big money. I could make my goals easily.
Perfect. Good.
Okay. So I found out pretty quickly, you got to call on this one guy. You got to call on Jim if you want to break into the gun stores. We all do what he does. And
you don't want to break into the gun stores, do you, Deb?
Oh, no. No. You got to break through with Jim.
Right.
That's not his real name. We're calling him Jim.
That's fine.
Anyways, so I took him coffee and I took him donuts and I visited him every week and I took a little abuse along the way. But I was determined. I was gonna
you're
make
persistent.
sure that someday I broke through. Yeah.
Persistent.
Okay. So the day finally came. I walked in and Jim said, all right. I'm going to be down at your main building. I worked in a bureau office out in the suburbs. He says, yeah, I'm going to be down at your main building today at 3 o'clock. Why don't you meet me there? Just meet me there and then we'll talk about this advertising. Wow. And I was like, yes, I got this.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I told my boss, I told all my coworkers and colleagues, I cleared my afternoon schedule. I called my husband. Back then this wasn't like cell phones and texting. I called him. I got it. I was certain. Well, I drove there to make the appointment at the downtown office, the big building at 3 o'clock. And I was a little bit late because traffic had been bad. So I was coming in right at 3 o'clock. And I rounded the corner and I saw Jim standing on the street corner in front of the building, along with a whole lot of other people. And I saw him and he was watching me in my car. And when he saw me, he's like ribbing everybody near him and he was pointing at me and laughing, just bust a gut laughing. Because he and all the others who were there weren't there to meet with me and talk about advertising. They were there with their picket signs because they didn't like the newspaper's position on Second Amendment rights. And he wanted to make a point with me. And he did. And I was absolutely mortified. I just, you know, I was crying.
Recover from that? Did you go speak to him or not?
No, my boss made me recover. She said, all right, well, then you're going to have to stop licking your wounds, get back in there. You tell him if he doesn't like the story that the newspaper's telling about him and about the Second Amendment, that he needs to advertise and tell his side of the story.
Tell his own damn story. That's exactly right. Good.
Yeah. It took me a few weeks to muster up the courage to walk back in there, but I did. And he was pretty surprised when I did. And eventually he actually did become an advertiser, but yeah, it took a lot of grit to get through that one.
Hey, Deb, tell me where, if people want to know, I'm sure they want to know how to get in touch with you and that kind of stuff. Will you mind sharing how people can find you?
Yeah, I'm all over social media. Find me. People First PS is my website tail. People First Productivity Solutions, but just do the PS, peoplefirstps.com. That's my Twitter handle. On LinkedIn, you'll find me by the business name or my name. Email me, deb.calvert@peoplefirstps.com. Whatever makes sense. Let's do talk. I really enjoy the connections.
That's great, Deb. Deb, you've been a super guest. I really appreciate your being here and sharing your stuff with us. I think there's a lot of great things. A couple things that I learned that kind of stuck out to me. Number one was to ask about the value creating questions. So, what matters the most to the person you're talking to? They may have a million problems, but which one matters the most? It's the most important. And I think it's really important to ask that because otherwise we're just wasting everybody's time. So No BS Sales Team, thank you so much for listening today. I hope you've gotten something from this. Please do share this, rate and review it. It helps raise us in the ratings. You know, my goal is to have 50% fewer bad salespeople on the planet by the time we're all done with this. So we got a few more to go. If you want to be on my newsletter list, it's text the letters NOBS, no BS, with no spaces, to the number 66866. We send out a weekly newsletter with links to the podcast and links to videos and a book list and things like that. We'll also have some information in the show notes about Deb and how to get in touch with her. So thank you. And thank you, Deb, one more time. I appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you, Walker. I appreciate your time and that of your guests. And we're going to give them some free book chapters too. So. Oh,
that's great. And I'll add that stuff to the links in the newsletter as well, and also in the show notes. Thank you, cool. Deb.